I remember when I started, it took me so much effort to only convince women that entrepreneurship was the solution for them. It wasn't even about marketing. It was just that option that was there that needed to be explained. And the first answers I had at the beginning was, me, an entrepreneur? Never. I'm not the type. I'm not blah, blah. And a lot of women are often the caregivers for many people, and their business goes last in the list of priorities.
Welcome to International Law Story, the podcast about intercultural relationships. My name is Christina, and in today's podcast episode, I would like to welcome Amel. Amel is currently living in Austria, and she built quite a business for herself. She is a business coach. She is podcast host as well of The Time Is Now, so definitely check that out. And as always, I will link it below as well. We're going to talk today about building your own business, because one of the most important things I've realized, and after what I've gathered from communicating with other intercultural couples, is that it makes such a difference if you have your own business, if you're able to move around freely, if you'll be able to take your business wherever you are, and if you're also financial independent. And those are the topics we're going to talk about today. So I'm so excited to have you as an interview partner today, Amel. I hope you're doing fine.
I'm doing great. Thank you so much for the warm welcome. I'm excited to have this conversation with you and your listeners.
Right. So I think we have a lot to talk about. So I would say let's just dive directly into the conversation. But before we start, just go ahead and introduce yourself a little bit. Like, who are you? What are you doing? What are your passions? I mean, we've been talking a little bit about you before I hit the record button, but it might be also super interesting for everyone who's listening right now or who's watching the video.
Yes, so I will try to make it short. Who am I? So my name is Amel. I am originally from Algeria, born in India and raised in Uganda, Serbia, France. And I've lived my whole young adult time moving from a country to another until the point where I end up in France, and I decided to stay there and build a career in advertising and never move again. And I said, never, ever, ever again. And then I went on holidays in Iran, met with the love of my life, but I was really like, oh my God, I'm so not ready to give up my career. I'm so not ready to give up my financial independence. So it was not an easy decision, but I still made the decision to move and join him in Iran. And that's where I started my business, because I immediately knew, because of my past, that pursuing an international career in advertising was not the thing that would work. Starting over and over from scratch as he keeps moving with his job, I knew it was not sustainable. And for me, the sustainability of the financial, not only income is important, but also the whole growth, the whole journey of growing in your career and progressively, elevating your career and your skills was important for me on top of the revenue. So I knew that entrepreneurship was the only way to go. But while I started my business in Iran, very quickly I realized it was so important for me to make sure that my business doesn't depend on just Iran. And it was in 2010, right? Before we even had Zoom, I remember I even had to use VPNs to be able to use Facebook, and internet was not even working properly. But I was very obsessed from the get-go on making my business location independent. And I experimented with so many solutions. And over the years, I really found my groove and realized all the tools we had, all the potential that we had nowadays to be able, as a sole entrepreneur and small business owner, to actually build a business that's portable and location independent. So I've had the chance to do that. But along this way, I had two big challenges. The first one was the loneliness of being an entrepreneur and having great mentors, but all their advice was just not fitting to my case, because there were very successful entrepreneurs in one country, right? And not location independent. And the second one was to meet with others, expats, spouses of expats like me, who just lost sense of purpose and identity once they gave up their careers. So I felt like I needed to do something about that. And that's how I started my podcast in 2015, to share all about how to build a business that's portable and motivate other expats to consider entrepreneurship as the solution to their dual career challenges. And so I've been doing that for the past 8 years now. And I started with a very specific niche of the expat spouses. Over the years, it has grown. And the pandemic was obviously a big moment because I had been already using all the tools before the pandemic, like Zoom. I was a beta tester of Zoom. So before it was even a thing. So I think that explained a little bit why suddenly I had a lot of interest that was beyond the expat field of how to build a business from home, even if we don't travel. But also I went from how to build a portable business to live on the move to how to build a business that's aligned with our needs. And those needs can be very different. It can be moving, it can be taking care of your family, it can be taking care of aging parents, it can be just having a hobby that you really want to pursue, but still care about building your financial independence. So that can really be a different reason, but the principles are the same. Aligning your business with who you are and making sure that your marketing strategies are really effective, but also consistent. And that means choosing strategies that are not overwhelming, that really fit to what works for you. So it was a long introduction, but I hope that wrapped up all the topics you're interested in.
Pretty much. I mean, obviously, we could spend some time here talking about everything in detail. Yeah. But I just want to give a little overview about what you're doing. I know it out of my own experience. I was telling you beforehand that I'm self-employed. I'm a small business owner myself. And for me, if I wouldn't be in this situation I was back then, I don't think I would have been self-employed. Because in my mind, it was like, I'm taking a risk. Mm-hmm. How am I supposed to approach it? Like, how am I supposed to take a business with me while traveling around and all of that? There were so many factors that has to be taken care of, but also the factor about my mindset, for example. Am I good enough? Mm-hmm. How much am I actually able to charge? And all those questions, So am I worth it? And that's actually something I personally struggled a lot, especially in the beginning. I'm honestly still struggling with it. For everyone who's listening or who's watching the video and who's thinking about being financial independent, having a portable business, being able to, move wherever and still being able to have an income. What is there, first of all, to take care of?
Maybe starting with where to start, right? If we think about starting a business, and there's a lot to think about, obviously, when you start, but I think we can simplify it. It doesn't have to be complicated. And first of all, you said something that for me is really important about investing when we start a business, or the risks. We live in a time where there's almost zero risks to start a business, especially if it's a service-based business where there's no production involved. And even if there's no production involved, I do think that nowadays there are so many methods to actually sell before even we produce, right? So the risks are mitigated by nature, thanks to the pandemic as well, and democratization of so many tools. But on top of it, because I've been doing this before the pandemic, the biggest advantage of the pandemic is also people's mindsets have changed, that clients are also willing to consume more products virtually, right? So that was even more of a challenge before as a virtual entrepreneur to have to convince people. Now we don't have to do that. So thinking about risks, I think it's a waste of time because there is ways to do it without overthinking it, right? The second piece is like where to start. So for me, it's very clear that the first thing to ask yourself is, what is the problem you want to solve with your business idea? And most people who start a business, they can't even explain that. And I think the first step is to know exactly what is the problem you solve. If you can't do that, the rest becomes very, very, very difficult. And when I mean the problem, I mean the problem, because most people actually, when you ask them, what do you do or what problem you solve? For example, let's say I help people be happier, or I help people, save time. But that's the outcome. That's the result. And what sells is actually knowing your clients so well that you can express their pain points and their challenges with precise. And that's what makes you become a very good entrepreneur and marketer, is when you know what are the struggles of your clients in terms of pain, not just in terms of results you offer them. So that's the first step, to do the market research, to understand where's the problem you have and validate it in the market to make sure that that's a problem that people are willing to pay for. And that's also often a step that with all my clients who are at the beginning of the stage, I often make them sell before even they launch. Market research actually can be helping you selling before you even have a website. You don't even need a website to sell. You just need to reach out to the right people and listen to their needs, not even talk that much, and make sure that you understood their pain points and how to solve it for them. I think that's the first step, defining the pain point and validating it. There's many other steps after that, but I could just simplify it in my framework that I call the 3 Cs. So the first one is clarity, being super clear about the problem we solve, the target audience, the marketing strategies, the content strategies, the product and the offers we have, the pricing, being super clear about all the elements of the business and the business foundations. The second is consistency. Once we have that clarity, it's important to build a very consistent strategies in terms of marketing and in terms of content and in terms of sales. Consistency is the key to success. And this is the one thing after clarity that most people struggle with and fail, the reason why they fail. And the third one is conversion, making sure that we are converting all the efforts that we do and having some ways to measure our conversion. And when that doesn't work, knowing how to analyze what's not working so that we can pivot, adjust, and fix things. I try to summarize it, but this is basically the overall thing that I think is important to consider when you get started.
You are definitely an expert on that field. I mean, what you've mentioned that you were a beta user of Zoom, for me, that's just like crazy to think about, because I know COVID changed a lot worldwide, but it had some great outcomes as well. Like, for example, what you've just mentioned, being able to reach anyone online and being able to have a business fully online that wasn't really imaginable before. Thinking about that you started all of that like that's crazy to think about, to be honest.
Actually, I started in 2010. 2015 is the time where I decided to share my knowledge with other people about this topic. But I had another business that I started in 2010 that was more geared towards corporate companies.
And it was also an online business, may I ask?
It was also a portable business, and I started already delivering my services virtually in 2010.
You definitely grew into that, and I really, really love that, because you can compare like back then and nowadays, and you definitely see how easy, and this is also what you've mentioned, how easy it can be nowadays to really start a business if you have a great business idea, if you're really passionate about it, if you follow up. Consistency is one of a very, very important words you've mentioned, and that's also actually something I am going through as well. But if you're passionate about what you're doing, you'll definitely be successful with that. Sometimes it just takes a little bit more time maybe, but besides that, like the 3 Cs you've just mentioned. So imagine I have a great business idea. I'm very passionate about what I'm doing. I'm really looking forward to it. I'm really excited. I'm registering my business. So what would be the next step from there on? I mean, I want to reach people. I want to get my message out there. You also mentioned that I don't necessarily need a website, which I totally agree with you. I don't have a website, for example, and I'm self-employed since 3 years already, and somehow it's working. But how do I get my message out to my target group? What would be the next step? And how do you support? Because you also specialized on marketing.
Yeah. I always simplify it again with just 4 simple questions to answer to when we start a business. For me, marketing is just a summary of those 4 questions. The first one is defining your target audience and answering the question, who do I want to serve? And when we answer this question, and saying everybody is not a good answer. So making sure that you are really, 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 really specific about a very small niche and a very specific niche when you get started is the way to go. It doesn't mean that you cannot dream big and think big, but if you really want to be effective and quickly become the expert to go to in your market, you need to start with a niche. And I love this quote that says, it's better to be a big fish in a small pond than a small fish in a big pond. I mean, so the more you try to resonate with everybody, the less you resonate with anyone. Answering the question, who do I want to serve, and being specific about that niche is very important. Second question, once you know who they are, then you need to answer, where are they? Like, where are they spending time to research and to find the solution to the problem you're fixing? And this is why initially I was saying it's really important to define the problem. Because when you know what is the problem, that you know where you can start researching, where are these people going to find answers? Sometimes it's Google, sometimes it's a trade fair, sometimes it's, social media, but we'll talk about social media later because I have a strong opinion about that too. But so answering the question, where are they spending time and giving attention to find answers to the problem they want to solve. And the third question, once you know where they are, then you can ask yourself, based on where they are, how do I connect with them? How do I create that connection? Let's say, for example, where they are, let's say you're a wedding planner or a real estate agent, and you find out that a trade fair is a famous one. So you know the trade fair is the place, but then you want to choose, okay, what do I do in the trade fair to get in touch with them? Do I buy a booth? Do I speak? Do I just walk around? Like, you want to define what is the best strategy for you in the trade fair to get in touch with that ideal client. Obviously, the obvious answer is to buy a booth, for example. So this is how simple marketing is, right? Where they are and what do I do to get in touch with them? And the fourth question is one that most people forget. And this one is very important to me, is once you know who they are, where they are, and what to do to reach out to them, the next one is how do you keep your clients satisfied and happy? Because the cheapest way to grow a business is word of mouth, is recommendation, is repeat customers. So while you're serving your clients, that's part of your marketing strategy, to actually serve them well so that they come back to you and bring you more business. Never forget that, because usually people, once they get the client, they forget that part, like delivering the offer, but also making every client feel special is very important. And no matter how small your business is, making sure that they feel heard and seen and served well, so that you can have more sustainability with the business. So for me, these are the 4 simple questions.
If you think back, may I ask, like in 2010 when you started your business, how did you find your first clients? How did it work for you back then?
Same thing. I asked myself, who do I want to work with? And I had a clear definition of international companies, and that were usually used to working with international people. So that was my thing. And what I did was to use my market research. That's another thing that I think is really important, to spend time doing market research. So I asked myself, well, where are these organizations? And I started with my network and asking, do you know somebody who knows somebody? So I listed the companies that I'm interested in and started asking for people if they knew somebody. And even if I didn't, I would shoot an email or call and ask for an appointment. And I would not sell anything. I would just say, I'm doing a market research to understand the needs of companies in this field, and I would love to have feedback from your experience. Would it be possible to have 20-minute meeting to just ask you a few questions? And the initial genuine process of really listening, like really going to that meeting and talking to people to learn from them is important. But if you're genuine, then the conversation often leads to interest, because if the problem is something you can solve, then usually they will talk about their problem, and you start saying, did you think of that? Did you think of this? And they was like, oh, maybe, yeah, that could be a solution. Do you know how to fix this? Actually, that's exactly what I'm starting to do. Would you like to do a trial? Right. So this is how I started selling, by just doing my market research and really asking people, how do they try to solve the problem they have, and what worked and what did not work. And what did not work is what helped me come into place and offer my services.
To me, it seems like even then, back then, 2010, all of the things you've done, all of the learnings you've gathered over the years, you just went for it. You were not afraid. And we're just like, okay, what's the worst after all? What's the worst that can happen to me? And you did a lot of things by feeling as well. Could that be like somehow common sense for you? It just was natural, or how did it feel like when you started all of that?
I think it was a bit easier for me, maybe because I have been having an experience in advertising, and the biggest lesson I've learned in my life was to sell books door to door. So I've been selling encyclopedia door to door, and I learned a lot from that experience. So I think that has helped. But you said something so important, and I just realized recently how, when we start from scratch is the most amazing moment, because we have nothing to lose, right? And I realize now, the more I grow, the more I'm a bit less fearless than I used to be. And that's something that I just realized recently. I'm like, come on, I know that the stakes are a bit higher maybe now, but it's a beautiful place to be when we start, because we have literally nothing to lose. Nothing to lose.
It's hard, all right?
So why not try it? And then if it works, it's great. If it doesn't, so what? We learn from it.
Yeah. Thank you so much for that. So I actually love that you're also sharing so much out of your own experience, because I'm so amazed, and I wasn't aware of that before we started into the conversation, that you're really self-employed since so long already. and that you've achieved so much in that amount of time. So I'm also a bit interested, like summarizing the past few years for you. What were your biggest learnings? Is there anything where you'd be like, okay, I would do that immediately again if I would have the chance? That just worked perfectly fine for me. Obviously, every experience is different. Every human being is different, which is great. But I'm just very interested about like who's sitting in front of me. So what made you to the person you are nowadays, like personally, combined with all the experiences you've made in those past few years within your business?
Oh my God, this is a big question. If I understand well, you want to understand like the origins of where this comes from?
The origins, but also because I feel like out of my experience with starting a business, if I'm sitting here, I'm looking back and I also see how my business shaped me personally, my way of thinking.
I love that. Okay, yeah, definitely. I often tell on my podcast and with my peers that for me, entrepreneurship is more just in the business. I feel like it's a spiritual journey because it pushed me so much outside of my comfort zone. And one thing I want to be careful as we talk, I want to make sure that it doesn't feel like everything was a smooth sail. I've been through so many challenges. I've been through so many ups and downs. The one thing, if you want to know all my challenges, you need to listen to the podcast. I've been crying in my own podcast sometimes. And I would share with my audience all the challenges I've had. I just want to talk a little bit about the challenges and then the overall, learnings. I think self-confidence is number one. Like as much as I was, maybe it sounds confident, the more I grew, the more the stakes were bigger, the more confidence I needed. And that was something I really needed to invest in and work on. And then my mental health was sometimes a real problem. And as well, having some, the biggest moment in my business was when my father was diagnosed with a disease and told us he only had 2 years to live, right? So that's what questioned me, how to make sure to continue all of these challenges, many among others, how to live authentically, how to live my life in the present moment, but still not give up on my ambitions. That was the biggest thing that has been the thread between these in the 13, 14 years, and how to show up authentically, how to grow with big ambitions, but without breaking myself into the process. And that was not an easy journey, right? But it was a continuous learning. And also, I also invested. I think investing in our growth is so important. I reinvested in myself and my business, a big portion of my money, because I believe that it's so key. If we want to grow, we can't grow by just being the same people all the time. We need to accept to evolve as a person. And I've invested a lot of money in that in many, many different ways. I also invested in a team. I have my own team as well that helps me scale my business. So I think one of the biggest things that has been as well a driving force is something that I realized from the age of 14. How entrepreneurship is more than just about money, as much as money is an amazing tool to grow, to make an impact, to live our lives with more freedom. What matters to me is also the impact we do. And I started my first entrepreneurial venture when I was 14 years old. It was a social impact project that I did in my school. And that's when I realized how knowing how to sell ideas is the best way to actually make the world a better place. If we wanted to make a change in this world and we don't know how to convey it, it doesn't work. So for me, that's always been part of my driving force through all the challenges, is to focus on my big why. Why am I doing this? And so that's what made me not give up even when things did not go right.
Wow. The big why, that's something, if you start a business, you will come along it quite often. As you mentioned, this is driving you. This is moving you forward. This is keeping your goals in front of you. But I think there's a difference between like coming along it. Hey, think about your why. Why are you doing this? And like really going deep into it. Everyone obviously has a different reason for why am I doing this? Not only in the business, but in general in different parts of lives. If you'll be able to summarize it for you, you'll be able to keep on moving forward after crisis, after you feel down, because in the end, like everything else, it's a total roller coaster, right? I'd be interested in diving a little bit deeper into like, how do I find my why? Like, how do I projected that it gets me moving. Maybe it's a topic that needs a little bit more explanation. Most probably it is. If anyone has any questions, as mentioned before, I'm going to link everything in the side notes and is in the description so they can contact you directly and get to know you as well. But maybe we can also at least scratch this topic a little bit.
Like you said, it's a huge topic, but I do think I do have a model that I call the 3 Ps. If you notice, I love frameworks to summarize big ideas. First of all, if we want to find our big why, we need to be willing to spend time exploring and being curious in general, right? But also in getting to know ourselves. It's key. Like rarely we take the time to listen to our intuition, to follow our intuition. So I think developing that curiosity as well as our sense of intuition is important. But at the beginning, I guess when we're younger, it's a bit harder than... So when we're young, then just be curious and try out different things. Try what comes to you, take opportunities, and you'll know what you like, what you don't like. Instead of thinking about it, just do it. I say, start first, perfect later, and if you don't like it, you just drop it. But I do have this tool that I call the 3 Ps. I used to work a lot initially to help people find their business ideas. I moved on a lot since then, but if you want to find a business idea and the big why behind the business idea, you need to figure out your 3 Ps. The first one is your superpowers. What are your superpowers? It means your skills, your competences, your wins, your achievements, but also your passions. Think about the things you can do all the time effortlessly. Think about the reasons why your family, your friends call you all the time to ask your help for. So what are those? List all those superpowers that you have. They're innate to you or that you developed over time, as well as your interests. That's your first P. The second P is problem. I really think that the big why is about what is that problem you want to solve. And if problem is not a word that you resonate with, especially for artists, think about desire. What is this desire you cater for, right? So, and I always say, if you look at your community, look at the people around you, what are the things that matter to you and trigger you? For example, for me, seeing smart women around me who gave up their careers to live in a miserable life, although we're supposed to be so grateful to have this international life, and we can't be happy because we lost everything. And that for me was just, you see how I get agitated, right? I can't even control it.
No, but no, let's definitely put a post-it on that, because that's exactly also a topic I would like to talk about after this. So let's keep this in mind.
Yeah, so I get very agitated. So think about what agitates you. Like, what are the problems you see around you that you want, even if you don't know how to fix it, that you want to fix, even if you don't know how to fix it. And the third P is people. Who are the people that you care about who have this problem? Like for me, the problem is the lack of financial independence, and the people were women, especially expat spouses at the beginning, and now it's evolved. So the circle, if you imagine 3 circles of Ps, the first P, the second, and the third, in the middle, that's your zone of genius. That's like you combine your passions, your interests, your superpowers with the problem you want to solve and the people you want to serve. And that's how amazing business ideas start.
So let's get back to this post-it I just pinned. By the way, that's also something I'm going to share on Instagram. So after publishing this podcast episode, because I think there are different graphics as well that combine everything what we're just talking about, at least like on the surface. But to be able to visualize it again, I think that helps as well in addition to this podcast.
I have a free online course, if anybody's interested, that I can share. It's free, where you can actually do some exercises to figure that out with the 3 circles. Yeah, I can give the link. It's tandemnomads.com/idea.
I will link it as mentioned, and also put a little information bar here.
That's a good idea.
So for people to pause maybe and to be able to check her out definitely directly. But to get back to this post-it I have in mind, or we just said here, like you've mentioned that you've been working together, or not been working together, but friends, maybe family members, but the women who are surrounding you, there are so many smart women who can do a lot when it comes to their business career. But instead, as far as I understood you, they would give up their career completely and be miserable, maybe when moving abroad, for example. And somehow it triggers me a little bit, to be honest, because as mentioned in the beginning, I felt the exact same way, only for 3 months, but it was enough for me already to question myself, like everything in life. What am I doing here? Why am I doing this? I don't want to be in this situation anymore. And I know for a fact that I wouldn't have felt that way if I would have had something I would have taken with me from Germany. And with me, I mean like having my business back then, because it would have been somehow my place to fall back into if things wouldn't work out. Because back then, Nacho and I, we were just dating for 1 year on long distance, approximately 1 year. And then we moved together. And it was a huge step because we didn't only move together. I quit my good job in Germany. I took all my belongings in just 2 suitcases, and I started a completely new life in a country I did not really like, or at least in a city I did not really like beforehand after visiting it for one time. And I felt like I lost my identity completely. For something I wasn't sure back then, what will I get back out of this? In our case, everything worked out. But as mentioned, I know for a fact I would have been much more grounded within me or within myself, knowing who I am, if I would have been working on my business, for example. And I sense, as you mentioned, that this type of topic is a quite sensitive topic for you as well. What experiences did you make during your business or in general the past few years? I mean, you've moved abroad, moved from one country to the other a couple of times as well. So what is it that makes you so almost angry about when you see smart women who give up their careers and who are miserable in other countries?
So one thing I want to say before I go into this topic is that it's okay when we make the proactive choice to not want to work. There's no problem with that. For me, that's actually a fine decision to make, as long as we're happy about it and we make it consciously. For me, it becomes problematic when we do it, but we don't really do it with thinking about ourselves and when we need that thing, when we want to work, but we feel like we don't have a choice. And initial reason why I got angry and started in 2015 the podcast was because the regulations were also very, very, and still sometimes very unfair to the spouses of expats where they're not allowed to work. My mission was also to advocate for better regulations on top of providing my services. For me, it was a matter of human rights, right? It was like human rights. Like, how can you not have a working permit or allow people to work? But despite of that, I think the bigger problem is to know that there are solutions and that people are either not aware of it or not feeling confident enough that they can do it. I remember when I started, it took me so much effort to only convince women that entrepreneurship was the solution for them. It wasn't even about marketing. It was just that option that was there that needed to be explained. And the first answers I had at the beginning was, me, an entrepreneur, never. I'm not the type. I'm not blah, blah. I'm like, people are making a big deal out of this. Fortunately, since 2015, a lot of things have evolved, and I'm so happy to see more and more women starting their businesses. Now, the next phase is to make it a priority. It's to make it to also believe in ourselves. And a lot of women are often the caregivers for many people, and their business goes last in the list of priorities. And I don't think that it should go first, but I think their well-being should be first. And when their well-being is attached to finding their own source of fulfillment and revenue, then it's important that women communicate that to the surroundings and learn to surround themselves with the support system they need to break the glass ceiling without breaking themselves. And that's something that I'm really, truly passionate about. So we went from just considering business as an option to now doing it in a way that we actually can make money. And we do it without breaking ourselves.
Making money is also something I've heard a couple of times during our conversation now. Yeah. I mean, the financial aspect obviously shouldn't be the main reason why you're doing something, because then you're doing it. But still, it is important because somehow you have to live. Somehow you want to have some savings or build some savings and have a retirement plan eventually and all of that. So also build something for the future once you don't want to work anymore or once you can't work anymore.
Building the safety net or the financial safety net is important.
Yeah. And it has different aspects, obviously, as well. I mean, you've mentioned as well that you've invested a lot into yourself, into your business the past few years, but that this is the only way also to move out of this zone, out of the I don't know if the comfort zone would be the right word for that, but in order to grow, you have to invest somehow. And I know for a fact that there are a lot of women out there that are afraid to invest a bigger amount of money, for example, but that are still questioning their future when it comes to their business, for example, because obviously you want to make money and you want to save money. You want to build a future for yourself and for your family. So how to combine all this?
I wish I could have a long conversation around that, but I'm going to summarize it with one word: self-love. And I think that when we value ourselves, truly, we believe that we deserve it. We deserve to invest in ourselves. We deserve to ask for help. We deserve to say no to things we don't want to do. We deserve to be paid the right price. We deserve to also demand in our partnerships to trust in us. I have a few clients who came to me who were like, my husband is not supporting this investment, but they still did it because they trusted in themselves. And for me, that's where it starts. It's a journey of self-love and self-worth. When we have that, the rest is much easier.
But sometimes it needs someone who leads into the right direction, let's say like that, or who sees the potential.
I think we should, that's the thing. If we always depend on the savior, we'll never get out of it, right? But we can look for guides instead of a savior. And it goes back to investing. Just the self-worth is not something that I had from day one. I also had to invest in that, like how to believe in myself, how to be confident. And by every investment I made was basically pushing my comfort zone in terms of self-confidence. It was proving to myself, I believe in myself. So I think waiting for somebody to show us that we're worth it is a bit dangerous. But looking for the right person to help us and judging if that person is the right person for us is the action of self-empowerment.
I would like to come slowly to an end, but you mentioned earlier in our conversation that social media, that's another topic we could get into later on. I'm curious about your opinion because social media is actually what I'm doing also for my business. It's part of it. It's a big part of it. So again, you go on and on. I can go on my soapbox, but okay. So there's two topics about social media that I think are problematic nowadays. I'm not talking about the consumption. I'm not talking about overload because that's another big topic, but I want to focus on entrepreneurship and business. The first topic is the fear of being present on social media, right? That's one that I think is something that not often, I'm glad that it's, by the time people work with me, they're already more willing to push their boundaries. But this is like often saying, oh, no, I don't want to be on social media, right? It's one thing to do it because we're empowered to say, I refuse to do it to social media, but then have a very good strategy to compensate, not even compensate, a very good strategy that makes sense. But I think embracing visibility for me is one of the big topics that I'm very, very passionate about for all my clients and especially for women. Helping women embrace the spotlight, which is related to confidence, is important, but also realizing that social media is not about you. It's about serving people with information they need. So very often when we think about social media, we think about influencers who do selfies and who put themselves in funny poses. And you can do that. There's no problem with that. But if that bothers you, do it your way. Do it your way, right? That does not bother you. So that's the first topic. But the second is that I think a lot of people confuse social media as a marketing strategy for visibility. Unless you decide to pay to play, social media is a place to nurture relationships, not to get visibility. And for me, when I work with my clients, we work on three pillars, but the two first ones are marketing strategies for visibility and content strategies for credibility. So content is about serving the people who are already following you because it's hard nowadays to get new followers if you don't pay, but focusing on those who are already following you and having marketing strategies to get people to follow you. This is different. You cannot just be on social media for that unless you decide to pay for ads. We've scratched the surfaces on so many topics during our little conversation here. So for everyone who would like to learn more about you, about your services, about everything you're doing, what's the best way to contact you?
Yeah, so the best way to contact me is to email me, connect@amelderegi.com. If you want to look at my website as well, all the information are there. Amel, A-M-E-L, Deregi, DERRAGUI.com. Or the simple way, if it's too much spelling here, just go to thetimeisnow.biz and it will send you to my podcast and my website as well. So the podcast is definitely a great place to get inspiration. And I also have a free quiz to help you assess where you are in your business. It's called, and then depending on where you are and the results, I will send you free guidance on what are the next steps to take. So if you go to thetimeisnow.biz and go to the homepage, you will find the quiz right there.
Thank you so much for your time, for all the knowledge you've been sharing. It was great talking to you.
Yes, thank you. And I look forward to continuing to following your journey and connecting with the audience.
Thank you so much for watching and or for listening to today's podcast episode. I hope you enjoyed it. And if you like what I'm doing, please consider to rate this podcast on wherever you're listening to it. And in case you're watching on YouTube, subscribe the channel. And as always, you will find all the information, everything in the description. So definitely check it out. I hope we'll see and hear each other again in a couple of weeks. So see you soon. Take care and bye.